All right. So week 10 covers really covers conditional statements. And I think this is actually up there with joins. This is one of those things that I think really adds a lot of power to SQL. So I really like teaching about it, talking about it. And I think it's like one of those weeks that's like really pivotal in the sense of this is the kind of stuff that I think you'll learn and it sticks with you for a long time. And so anyways, like rather than again go through the slides and kind of just talk about it, this is one that I think is really handy to kind of just like get our hands on. And so I'm going to walk through the exercises and I'm going to skip the first exercise because it's fairly straightforward. Actually, you know what? No, we are going to talk about it because we want to talk about the little difference between a couple of these. So I'm just going to create a new file here. Let's say use Keela. All right. And let's make sure we're connected here to a server. So let's double save schemas, refresh. There we go. I don't know what that was about, but here we go. All right. So inside of our Sequila database, we have a couple different things, but the one that we're going to use for this first exercise is Sequila, or is language, sorry. So if I select everything from language, you'll notice we have a couple different languages here. So basically what we want to do is we just want to like say like what kind of character set it uses. So I guess as a little bit of background, these logic cases allow us to, I would almost say, fabricate data. There's a couple other uses, but in most cases, we kind of use case statements to kind of say like, if this, then this. And a lot of times we're like generating a new set of data that doesn't exist. That's why we have to quote transform it just a little bit. So like in this case, we're adding an additional column that doesn't exist in the table, but relates to the table that we're pulling from. And it happens to work like every other if statement in programming language where we kind of like give it a variable and then a return. So it's kind of like a switch statement mixed with an if statement. And there's two kind of ways we can do this. So there's a simple and searched. And so what we see here is a simple case expression, and you'll get from the reading and from the PowerPoint that a simple case expression is when we give the variable up front and then we just apply a simple switch to those. So when this, then this, when this, then this, when this, and this. And it's simple. And it's simple in the sense that all of these equal, like, it saves typing because we can say, when name is equal to English, then Latin 1. When Italian, when name is equal to Italian, then Latin 1, and down the line. And so for exercise 1, it wants us to adapt this to be the same results, but using a searched case expression. So anyways, what we're going to do, and it says, try to use as few when clauses as possible. And what I actually really like about this example is that when we use simple, it can only be one value, right? You're very limited. You can only do equals. It has to be, when value. It can't be like combined logic. So we're going to do this, and you'll notice it says try to use as few when clauses as possible. So we're going to actually cheat this just a little bit and using it in a searched case. So again, the difference between the searched case and not in a simple case is that we say case, and instead of saying case name, we're going to just do each individual piece of logic on its own chain, so to speak. So we're going to say when name is equal to English, then Latin 1. And just for right now, I'm just going to say else, work in progress. And then we end all of our case statements with an end. And then that's it. And usually, you know, we put end as character set or some sort of name. So I'm just going to do that. And we're selecting this from language. So I'm just going to run this, you know, and we get Latin 1, everything else work in progress. So this is basically an example of equivalent, but within search. So we could do this all the way down just like they did here. But like I said, we're going to cheat just a little bit because we're using search. We have some more tools at our disposal. And I'm going to say in. So rather than have to write that out 100 times, I can just say Italian and yada, yada. And in fact, I'm going to cheat even more and say not in, because I'm all about saving typing. And we know that Japanese and Mandarin, I guess there's a couple others. Well, let's just do this because I think there's no unknowns. So as long as it's not in Japanese and Mandarin, then it's Latin 1. When name is in, and what's nice is I can just take and copy this exact thing here. Then UTF-8. And then else unknown. Now, in this case, we're going to get the same outcome, but it obviously wouldn't be the best practice long-term, because if we added another language, it's going to default to Latin 1. And maybe that's by design, you know, but typically we would want to define those. But for the sake of the exercise, that's the simplest way I can think of. So anyways, that's like a searched versus simple. I'll be honest, I never use a simple case expression because you end up always wanting to add to it. And so anyways, I always use a searched case expression because of the limitations that come with a simple. All right. So question 2, it just asked to build a table that has it by rating. You know, and this looks pretty easy at glance, but it ends up being trickier when you realize that rating isn't its own like table, which is typically, you know, where it sits. So we get this from film. And inside film, and this, what I really like about this example is one of the best use cases of conditional logic I've had is we need to pivot columns. So we have our ratings here. We want to pivot these into columns. So really we want to go from row values into columns, which is kind of tricky if you think about it. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to write some case statements. So we're going to get, you know, and it has the stuff, but really what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to have our select, and then we're going to say count. And I'm going to put distinct to always be safe because we want to just count distinct films because we just really want to get the count of films by each rating. And it starts with G. So I'm going to say count distinct case when rating is equal to G, then, and then in our when clause, we want to determine what we're going to count. So in this case, film ID. And then I'm just going to put end. And then I'm going to say as G. And let's put it all uppercase. And we're going to do that same thing. So count distinct case when rating is equal to PG, then film ID. And as PG. Now, the reason this works is because when we do this conditional, anything that's not equal to G here is going to return null. And we know that the count function does not count null values. So basically, we're going to exclude all the nulls. So for that column specifically, it's only going to count the film IDs that exist there, which will only return for films with a rating of G. So end result is we get the total count of films that have a G rating.
For our alias after the as, does it have to have a quote to make it a string, or could it just be a
Yes, it
G?
could just be G. And in fact, I'm glad you said that because I don't want this, because there's a cool little trick I'll show you. And I think in fact, this used to be in the results set in the question, and it drove me nuts because everyone would get hung up on it because it had like this cool little tidbit, and even I was like stumped on this forever. And then I realized like, oh, it's telling me how to do it, not asking me to implement something. So yeah, let me show you that cool little trick here. And the PG-13 might be the only one that doesn't work. Rating is equal to R, then film ID and as R, and then finally so we'll see if this works. I don't think it's going to let us do this, which is fine. We can just, yep. So we're going to just put a double quote around you and a double quote around you. There we go. Now, what's cool, this is like the little hack that I didn't know, is that when you select things from this, maybe it's later actually, I'm gonna hold off on this because it comes later. But if we were to build this like as a subquery, so I'm gonna try this, select everything from, I think eventually we end up building this as a view in a later week. All right, so I've just basically built this as a subquery, so we can kind of select from it. But what's cool is if I do select, if I select G from there, you'll notice that it has a lowercase g. But if I put an uppercase G, you'll notice it has an uppercase G, but they both work. But the case matches whatever you choose to select, which is really interesting. I had no idea that it would do that. Anyways, off topic, but fun, just little tidbit. I think we get to that later, so no worries. Okay, so question number 3. So it says, write a query that returns the first alphabetized letter of a customer's last name. So basically the first letter of their last name, and then the count of both active and inactive customers. And we just want it to be for that specific letter. So, like, oh, if it starts with the letter A, we want to count those. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get a list of all the first names. So, or last names, sorry, the first letter of last names. So that's where I always like to start. So this is from the customer table, obviously. And let's get our last name. So this is like base starting point. Here's all of our last names. Now what we want to do is we just want the first letter. So I'm going to just do this substring, and we want first one, last name. We go 1 and 1, and let's just see what we get here. Nope. So we're going to go, and I can't remember how this works. Substring, does it go? Actually, I think
I
it goes
used
like
left.
this.
Left works nice.
Yes, left does. Yeah, left, either one. So we can use left, last name. In fact, let's just show left. Left. I always default to substring just by default. But I think we can just do this. Yep. So there's that. So anyways, there's 2 different functions that can get us what we want. And for the sake of simplicity, let's go with yours. And then what we're going to do is, so let's delete the last name because we don't need it. So now we have our first letter, and we're going to call this as starts with. So here's our base now. We have starts with, and now we want the count of active and inactive customers. But the one thing we got to do is, you'll notice A is listed a bunch of times. So what we want to do is we want to change this to select distinct. Right, there we go. Now that gives us our distinct list, which is great. Technically, we don't necessarily need it for this because we're going to aggregate. So as we've talked about with aggregation, we can use this count function, right? So if we just want the total count of all the customers with that name, we could just do a count distinct of customer ID, right? As customer count. And with that, it's going to tell us that we need to group it. And so, because we're aggregating, so we need to group by starts with. And there we go. So this is the total count of customers. And if you look at our results, we can see that we have 20, and it's the summation of the active and inactive. So really what we want to do now is we just want to come up with a total by active and inactive. And inside of our customer table, we have a column that's called active. And that's what we're going to use here. So let's take a look. What is inactive? Select distinct, active from customer. What's our values here? And it's binary. So it's a 1 or a 0. So we're going to use this, this same concept that we did before. And we're going to say select distinct, but we're going to say case when active is equal to 1, then customer ID. And as active count. And there we go. So now we can see, we have, a subset of that. And now we're going to just copy this. But this time we're going to say if it's inactive, then we're going to count the customer ID, and we're going to call this inactive. Now, the reason why I like to show the total is because then we can see if we check out, and 19 and 1 equals 20, 55 and 0, 49 and 3. Yep. So you can see that we tie out, everything foots. So we know that we're accurate. So that's question number 3. Now, question number 4 takes it to the next level, because if you notice, we don't have some customers that start with the letter like Z, for example, or U. And so that letter of the alphabet is just missing. And so in question 4, it says, we want to, basically it says you'll need to fabricate a table composed of 26 letters of the alphabet and use an outer join to resolve this problem. So basically we just need to build our own table that has all the letters of the alphabet. Now, what we can do is, there's a lot of different ways we can go about this, but really we can do like a union. Anyways, there's a bunch of different ways we can kind of go about it. So let's just start with the easiest one. So we can kind of just say select A union, select B, right? And let's just put as letter. And, we can go on and on like this, and it's going to just build us our list here. So we can do that. That's probably the easiest here, but I'm going to show you a little trick. I don't know if you guys enjoy using or have used Visual Studio Code. It's kind of my code editor of choice, so you can feel free to use what you want. But we're going to use this to kind of make this a lot easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, X, Y, and Z. 26 lines. Got the alphabet right. So we at least got that far. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the find and replace tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for every instance of a carriage return. And I'm going to replace it with a quote as letter carriage return quote. And then, well, before we do that, so let's just build it in here. So basically every carriage return, I'm going to add in a basically quote as letter union select. So that way, when we do replace all, we have the bulk of our query. So then we just need to add the first and the last. And bam, there we go. That's just a lot easier than typing it all out manually, if you ask me. And there's our alphabet. So now if I were you guys, what I would do is, because we fabricated this, right? And I think stuff like this is often kind of useful to have. In fact, oftentimes I'll build tables like these that just have numbers like 1 to, a million. Or I might build my favorite one is I always build a calendar table, because as we know, like each business runs on a different fiscal calendar. Like personally, like I've dealt mostly with broadcast calendar, which is heavy in the media where, weeks start on Monday. They go from Monday to Sunday, and the months are really weird to where the way months are figured, it's always, whichever week contains the first of the month is like the new month. So for example, on like this week, the week of December 1st, technically November 28th is already December. And so anyways, it gets really confusing. So I'll actually fabricate a table of every date from, January 1st, 2000 to all the way to January 1st, 3000. And it builds all that in, because I'll use case statements to say like, oh, this month is this, specific month. And so I'll have a column called month. I'll have a column called quarter. I'll have a column called year. And then all the dates. So that way, when I'm joining stuff, I don't have to worry about figuring that in every query. I could just quickly join it. So what I would recommend in this case, since we've fabricated this, you can do create table alphabet as, and then you'll have your letters. So I'm just going to run that. And now that I've ran that, if I refresh over here, in Sequila, I now have a table called alphabet, and it has all the alphabet in it. So that way I can just say select everything from alphabet. And we have our alphabet. All right, so that's kind of my way to go about it, just to make it easier. And then, so now that we have our alphabet, let's just do this. So we're going to say select letter from alphabet, and that's our base. But what we need to do is we need to add in our customer. So I'm going to give alphabet an alias of A, and I'm going to left join. So we get everything from alphabet, even if it doesn't have a match. Left join that with customer C on a dot letter is equal to, and then we're just going to utilize this same thing here. And just to be on the safe side, whenever I do stuff like this, I always just like to be extra precautious, because you're dealing with user inputs and other things that are out of control. Make sure we uppercase both of those. So we should match on the letter equals the first name, their last name. And yeah, so let's see what we get if we add, let's just run this, make sure it works. There we go. And you'll notice that now we're getting multiple A's, which is what we want. So now what we want to do is let's just add in account distinct c.customer ID as customer count. And again, we're going to have to group by a dot letter. And there we go. So there is our customers by last name. And if we look down here at Z, 0, U is 0. So we know that that's working. And so now it's just a case of copying this exact same thing here. And we can just copy this. And even though we don't have to, again, I always like to do it just in case something else we end up joining later. So we just add our aliases, and there we go. Active and inactive count, even for our ZUs and that kind of stuff. So that's question 4. And then question 5 returns alphabet, same thing. But this time only for those letters where the count of active customers is greater than 30. So question 5 is actually super easy because we can use this exact same query, and we're already doing a group by, right? So all we have to do is say having a count of active. So active count greater than 30. Is it greater than 30? Greater than 30. And there we go. So that's question 5. So question 5 is literally just one more line beyond the previous. All right. So anyways, that is conditional logic. And I like to use it for a lot of like things like this, like when, you want to build like all these different kind of things. Is basically kind of like, I almost think about like a funnel, but it's more horizontal than vertical. Because we can see a lot of different things. Like, so for example, in this same case, if we want to, in fact, I'm going to take out this just for now. So we have our like inactive count and our active count. But to put that in a more like kind of usable metric, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and say, I want the percentage. What percentage of my customers are active versus inactive by the letter? And let's take out the letter. We don't need the letter of their name. So before I butcher this whole thing, let me copy it. Because I guess my kind of excitement comes from a more business analytics perspective. And so I really, really enjoy looking at like metrics that are useful. And to me, like having a customer count is useful, but inactive count is less useful to me versus like a percentage. And so how do we get the percentage of active? Well, we take the total number of active over the total number of customers. Right. And let's see how many there are, because that should give us there we go. So we took out the letter of our name because we're looking, to me, again, that's a useless metric. We know that people aren't going to be more active based on the letter of their last name. So it's pointless to segment by the letter of the last name. So we can look and see that, 98% of our customer base is active, which is fantastic. And then let's do the same here for our inactive. And I'm going to change this from inactive, active percent to inactive percent. Same thing. So there's our easy math, right? So we can kind of see our percentage. So, as if I was interested in this business, very quickly I can look and say, hey, we have 599 customers on the books. Of those, 98% are active and 3% are not. And then from there you could go on to have a bunch of questions to say, well, what determines active, inactive, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so that's kind of why I like to use it. So you can kind of combine these. You can do all sorts of fun stuff. Another fun one. So like if we're looking at, let's look at everything in the payment table. So here's our payments. We've done stuff like this before. But if we take the sum of amount, right, that would give us the aggregate. But let's say we want it by a specific month. So let's say the year of payment date and the month payment date. And let's call this as count year, as count month, and then as total revenue. Right, and we need a group by cal year and cal month. All right, so there's our total revenue. Now, let's say that we're doing reporting for our fiscal months. Let's say it's 2005 June. Let's say it's July of 2005, right? And we say, hey, we want to know how we did compared to the previous month. Pretend that we don't have any future months at this point. Pretty common reporting. How do we do month to month? And so I'm going to put in a where clause just to kind of put this in there. So we're going to say where payment date is less than 2005, and we're going to compare July. So we're going to say anything less than 8/1. All right, there we go. So we're going to pretend like this is our current look, right? Now we could do this math, but like, let's say we want to build it as part of our overall reporting, right? We kind of just like want to spit out like a bunch of different metrics. So like we might want the sum of the total revenue. I think that's great. But let's say we want to say like, oh, what was the difference from one month to the other? So we could, we'll take out these. Again, we're going to start over here. So we're going to say sum of amount, but in this case, we're going to add a case statement. So we're just going to say case when year of payment date is equal to 2005 and we need a parenthesis. When the year of payment date is equal to 2005 and the month of payment date is equal to, in this case, we want to say 7, then amount. And as current revenue, right? Because this will give us July's revenue, right? So let's get the previous month revenue. So we're going to take this same thing here. So we're going to get our current. Let's add in the previous. So we just need to say 6. And there's our previous revenue. And then we want a difference between them. So, how did we perform this month versus last month? So basically we're going to take the current minus the previous and as, well, not end, we're just going to say as, let's just call it delta. Oh, and we don't need this. There we go. So we did 28,368. The previous we did 9,629. So we did 18,000 more, which is amazing. And to put that into, a more manageable number again, because it's always good to see like that, but let's see the percentage delta. So, How would we get the delta? Well, we take old minus new over the old. So old minus new. So we get the delta and we put it over the old as delta percent. So we saw almost a 200% increase from 1 month to the other. So anyways, you can kind of see how using these case statements can become very powerful when you're trying to do a lot of this stuff. Anyways, because you can very quickly kind of just like throw things together. Does anyone have any questions? Case statements. All right. Well, in the last couple minutes here, and I guess I'll leave it up to you guys who are here since you're here, your time. Because I was planning on maybe showing like a quick example of how we could, using Python, connect to a database to kind of like build like a front end web page. If that's something you guys are interested in, I'm more than happy to walk through it. If you'd rather just focus on the curriculum, because this is definitely above and beyond the class, so I don't want to like overwhelm. So I'll leave it up to you guys, and feel free to just throw it in the chat, whatever. If that's something you're interested in, I'm happy to go over it. If you'd rather kind of see that as
sounds
like
awesome.
Okay, that sounds good. Cool. So what I like to use, and what I found simplest, and I think the simplest to understand, because I think most of you end up taking a Python course at some point anyways. So I kind of gravitate that way. And also I enjoy it because APIs, you've probably heard of PHP, which is a dying language. And that's by far probably the easiest, just to say, hey, like I just want to connect the database and throw something on a page. PHP is super easy that way, but as we all know, it's kind of a dying language. If it's not, I'm not going to call it dead, but it's definitely not a modern language. And so from there, you're kind of left with a few options, but all of them come with this heavy clout of overhead knowledge that it takes, like React, Angular, Node, like they're all pretty complex. But one thing that I've found that I really like is Flask, because it's really modular. It's simple. Most people already have Python installed. And so it's super easy just to kind of like get off and running. And so I thought we could just do that. So for example, I'm just going to pull up my terminal here, and I'm just going to say pip. Let's make sure I have it. Which pip 3. So, okay, so I have pip 3. So I'm just going to do pip 3 install Flask, right? And just like that, it's going to install Flask for me. So Flask is installed. And then from there, it's super easy. So I'm going to kind of like walk through, and this may be kind of like a multi-part kind of thing here. But anyways, I thought we could just get started by making sure Flask is up and running, and that sort of thing. So the first thing we want to do is create a place to kind of store our project. So I'm going to put mine in development, personal, and I'm going to make a new directory. I'm just going to call Flask. I'm just going to call Flask for now. But you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to call it Flask. And then from here, we can build a couple of different directories. And just since we're testing right now, like this is going to be like my actual project. In fact, let's go back. Instead of calling this Flask, I'm going to rename it. So let's move Flask, and I'm actually going to call it I'm going to call vehicle DB. So I think that's the name of my my little sample database we've been working with. So we'll use it. So vehicle DB. So I create this folder. Inside this folder, I'm just going to real quick create a couple directories. And FYI, you could do this using like whatever you want. If you want to do it in the terminal, great. If you want to do it inside of here, you can just create new folders here as well. Up to you. I like to do it all through terminal. So yeah. So but the three things we're going to create is we want to create a couple different directories. We want to create a directory called static. We want to create a directory called views. And actually, is it singular or plural? Let's take a look. I have another project here we can take a look at. It is plural. Okay. So anyways, we're going to do views. So static, views, templates. And let's just leave it like that for now. So we're going to create those three folders, static, templates, and views. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to create one file. So I'm just going to say touch, and we can call this, and I usually just call it the name of the app or just app.py. So in this case, I'm going to call it vehicle.py. And there's all of our files, and I'm going to open these all up with Visual Studio Code. All right. So vehicle.py is kind of going to be our main kind of file here. And basically what it's going to have in it is kind of like the key, like starting point of our web app, so to speak. So what we need to do is, first of all, we need to import just some of our dependencies. And this is where it's just pure Python. So we're going to say from Flask, import Flask. Right. And we're going to just start that simple. From Flask, import Flask. And then next thing we're going to do is we're just going to kind of create what we like to call a route. And a route is basically a URL endpoint. And keep in mind, Flask is like, it's used for a lot of different things. In fact, if you Google search which companies use Flask, there's quite a bit. But super, super useful for building APIs. That's kind of what I would consider to be the most common use case. But anyways, let's build our endpoint. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put an @ symbol and say @route. And basically we're going to build our main kind of index. And actually, let's just call it hello world. Let's just build / hello world. Right. So / hello world. And we're going to define a function called hello world. And this function is literally just going to return, sorry, not print. It's just going to return, and it's just going to return some HTML. So I'm just going to say hello world, basically our little first example of Flask here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. There it is. Let's go back to the terminal. And one thing, now we don't necessarily have to do this. In fact, let's skip it for now. We're going to keep this super simple. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to run, I'm going to say export Flask app equals, and then just vehicle.py. Right. So export Flask app equals vehicle.py. Basically, we're creating a variable called Flask app and saying, hey, basically vehicle.py is our app. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to just say Flask run app is not defined. Oh, I think I need to define app. Hold on. So one thing I'm missing in here is we need to define our app. So let's do that. So we just say app is equal to, and then we say Flask __name __. There we go. So same thing, we're just going to do Flask run. Okay, so now that we added that one line of code we needed to define our app, now it's running. And you'll notice it says it's running, and this is by default. It's running locally here on our computer. So, and it tells you what the address is, but you can also just type in localhost port, and it's always on port 5000 when we're testing. Now you'll notice it says not found, but that's because we only built one endpoint, and that endpoint was hello world. And bam, there is our Flask web server running for us, right? So we can change this to whatever we want and it would return it. So what we're going to do is we're going to real quick build another app.route, and we're going to call this one just our plain old index. And we're going to say define homepage or something, you know, and we're just going to say return H1 homepage. Right, save. We come back over here. We can just exit this, rerun it, and refresh. Hello world is still giving us our endpoint, but we can also do this and we're at our homepage. So anyway, so this is like basic. So you can see with very little lines of code, we are up and running. We have a whole framework at our fingertips, all based in Python, which is magical to me because we can from here do literally whatever we want. So now what I want to show you is what's called templating. So obviously we don't want to have to write all of our HTML in here and all that baloney. So what we're going to do is we're going to, inside of our templates, we're going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this base.html. And Flask uses something that's called Jinja. And Jinja is a templating language that allows us to kind of reproduce a whole bunch of stuff. And anyways, it's really handy because we can save a lot of typing essentially. So what I like to do is, so and from here we can kind of just do whatever we want, but I want to kind of keep it somewhat sane. So let's do Bootstrap W3 schools. So I'm a big fan of Bootstrap, which is just a pre-built set of CSS. And we can say Bootstrap 5, get started. There's our blah, blah, blah. And so here, and those of you who know HTML off the top of your head, how does this start? Do we start with head, or what's the first tag? Is it HTML that goes first?
It's HTML's first. Your header's going to be after.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you. There's our head. And then I think we can just throw this right here. Cool. Okay, so what's cool about templating, so you'll notice that I called this base.html. It's kind of what I like to do, but let's so what I like to do is and I'm going to pull up one here is kind of like an example because I always kind of get mixed up on this. So let me pull this out into its own window. That didn't work. Anyways, there we go. So we can define blocks here. And the way this works is we say block and we give it a name. So block HTML, and then I think we can end block HTML. Yes. Apologies. Like I don't do this every day, so kind of refreshing here along the way. But what I like to do is because we can override any of these in any subsequent thing here. So this is all going to come together in just a minute. So blockhead, and block head. And anyway, so we use these like kind of tags to kind of like build our template, so to speak. Do you guys know, does the title go in the head?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So what I like to do is, because from page to page, we might change different things. And so I like to kind of template this way, because then we can change whatever we want without having to like come back here. Okay, so there's that. And now what comes first? Is it main or body? You guys remember? Sorry, you have to keep reminding me.
It would, oh,
technically the everything that gets physically displayed on the page is in the body tag, and then you split it up between header, main, and then footer.
Perfect. This is just my OCD kicking in, so I apologize. So I'm going to try and keep it simple from here. So I'm just going to do a header. And I'm going to navigate to Bootstrap 5. And I'm going to just really quickly grab their nav bar. Perfect, because they have sample code. And really, I just want a nice little nav bar. So I'm actually going to take and just copy this. Right, there's my nav bar. Bam. So block header. Throw this in there. And then I'm going to do another block. Now I'm just going to call this content. And I'm not going to do a footer. Whoops. And block content. All right. And actually, I'm going to call this main. Block main, block main. And then in here, I'm going to do my block content. All right, perfect. So what I like about this is this is our base HTML, right? So I'm just going to save this base.html. Now I'm going to leave this, and you'll notice that we don't like really have anything here of much like content value, so to speak. It's pretty simple. But what we're going to do is we can kind of use this template. So I'm going to create another file here, and I'm going to call this, let's call this homepage.html. Homepage.html. And what we can do here now is we can extend this stuff. So I'm going to just copy this because I have a lot of this same stuff going on here. Homepage.html, base.html, base.html, nav bar. Did I call it nav bar? I think it was header. You'll notice I can kind of keep a lot of this stuff. We don't have a sidebar. Content. Block content. Anyway, so you can see we have this block content here. And I can do a bunch of different stuff. So now we have homepage.html. I'm going to leave this here. And in fact, under content, I'm just going to put a new thing here that says, welcome to our site. You know, something simple, just kind of show that it works. Go back here, and on our homepage, instead of returning homepage, we're going to return a render template. Now, what we want to do different, though, one thing that we need to do is we need to import one last thing. So from Flask, we want to import Flask, obviously, but we also want to import render template, which is a kind of function. So what we're going to do is we're going to say render template, and we're just going to give it the name, and it already knows to look in templates. So all we have to do is say what file we want to use, in this case, homepage.html. So I'm going to save that. Let's go back to the terminal, quit, rerun it. Make sure we don't get any errors. We can come back here and we get an error. So let's go take a look. And you'll notice we get a Jinja exception. So we had, instead of end of statement block, we got head. So somewhere I messed up on this. Actually, where is it? Environment.py. Oh, yeah. Homepage.html. Actually, it's clear in base. So on base, line 13, end block, head. That's the old one. Line 13. Nope, that's the old one. Block 13 and block head. And it was expecting, what was it expecting? Oh, this one. And block title. There we go. All right, so minor thing. So we quit, rerun it. Let's try again. There we go. So now you can see we have a nice little site going. Now you notice like this just says nav bar. So I want to change that. So I'll come back in my base, and where it says nav bar, we're going to change this to be vehicle DB, save, come back over here, last run. And then we can refresh. Now I know we're coming down to the end here. So I just real quick want to wrangle this back home to where it is relevant to the class. So, we have MySQL running here on our server. So what we need to do is we need to connect to MySQL using Python. So we can just Google it, Python, connect to MySQL, in case you ever want to look it up, and hopefully without typos. And there's lots of resources. So this one, MySQL.connectors, we can just come up here to vehicle.py, and on our homepage, like let's say we want to start actually building stuff. So the first thing we need to do is we need to import some dependency, in this case from MySQL.connector. And do we just import that? Yes. So we don't even have to say from, we just say import MySQL.connector, and then we can connect. So it has our connection here, and we can kind of do whatever we want. So let's go like this. We're going to just come in here inside of our function, and we are going to create our connection. And the connection is from MySQL.connector import connection. All right. And so from here, we can connect to our database. So let's do that. Let me hurry and get our connection here. So my user is, actually it's root. Should we build a new, let's do this right. Let's build a new user. So coming back to my terminal, just going to open up a new tab here. And I'm going to say MySQL, or actually let's just connect, where's Workbench? Sorry, I'm jumping around all over. We're going to come here, go home, right click here, say start command line client. And then that should have put it right here. All right, so I'm going to say create user app system identified by Fuzzy Buffalo. And then we're going to say grant all privileges on star.star to app system. There we go. So now we have our user. So we're going to say app system. Now, technically, you wouldn't want to grant everything. We would just want to grant the normal thing, but we're just going to do this for now because we might just use Sequila as a quick example. Fuzzy Buffalo. It's on our current database, and for now, we're just going to connect to Sequila since I can't remember my actor tractor stuff. So we're just going to do this, and let's just make sure we don't get any errors. That's always a nice step one. So let's go here. We're going to rerun this. And to get that code to fire, we have to actually run our page because that's kind of what triggers it. So according to this, everything worked, which is fantastic. So we have our stuff here. Now, if we go back here to our MySQL connector, we can actually do a query, querying data Python using the connector. So import MySQL.connector. Let's actually do that. MySQL.connector import, and then connection is equal to MySQL.connection, right? Yep. Okay. So in this case, we build a cursor, and in normal stuff, so this connection.close, that's how we just close the connection. So the first thing we want to do is build our cursor. And to build a cursor, we just say cursor is equal to the connection.cursor. And the cursor is the thing that's actually going to go through and pull our data. And then from now, we can just build our query. So in this case, let's just query. And I'm going to say query is equal to select first name and last name from customer. And I apologize, we're going over, but I'm hurrying so we can bring this home. So there's our query. And then from there, we just need to execute it. So I'm just going to say cursor.execute. And I'm just going to put query there. Now, we want to return some values. Excuse me. So we'll say for row in cursor, I think. What is it? Got it. So we can say for first name, last name in cursor, and then it would loop, right? And in this case, really what I want is I want a dictionary. So let's see if we can do that. MySQL connector Python dictionary. There we go. A dictionary cursor. Dictionary equals true. So we just want to connect, and so we just want to say dictionary equals true. There we go. And then, so now we should get a list of stuff. So we're just going to say customers is equal to cursor.execute. Now what we're going to do is on our home page, I'm just going to put a comma, and I'm going to say customers is equal to customers. Here we go. And let's, for diagnostic, let's print customers. And let's save this, and let's make sure that works now. So again, we're going to quit. rerun, come up here, and we get an error. Module MySQL has no attribute connection. So we're going to give that an alias to see if that's the problem. Refresh. Okay, so it was just a simple naming thing. So I'm just going to name that as MySQL. So that way it knows MySQL.connection is coming from here. All right, so everything's working. So now I'm going to go to homepage, and inside of here, I'm just going to add an HR. So this is where we can build our HTML. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a table, and I'm going to give this table a row. And inside of that row, I'm going to give it a header, and I'm going to say first name, and then another table head of last name. And then we're going to do, that's the start of our table. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this, and I'm going to say for customer in customers, right? And then come down here and end my for loop. And this is what's cool about Jinja is we can just loop right through this stuff. And I'm going to give it a table row and table data to say customer. Oops. And we need to give it value. So we go like this, customer dot first name. And table data TD customer dot last name. All right, let's see how we did. Flask run, refresh. Uh-oh. None type is not iterable. Okay, so we need to get proper results. So all right, so let's see if we can get it, because somehow we're not getting there. This is what we're missing. So customer is equal to cursor dot fetch all. So we execute the query, and then we say customers is equal to cursor dot fetch all. That's what we were missing. All right, so let me try again. Flask run, and then we execute it. And bam, just like that, all of a sudden we have connected a front end to our back end. Simple as that. And it didn't take much code. I mean, it takes a little kind of working here and there, but it works. But what I like about the way that Flask is we can build whatever endpoint we want, program Python however we want, and then we can simply send, because this section here, when we render a template, we say this is the file we want to send, and then this is the value. So we're just saying, hey, the customers from here, send it to the home page as whatever data it is, because it's still Python on the other end. So from here, we have this Jinja template that runs a for loop, and it says, hey, for every customer in customers, build a row, fill it with data, and end the for loop. Does anyone have any questions? Comments?
Very cool
stuff.
Yeah, I really like it. And we will continue, like I said, whenever we have time, because I'd like to get a little bit more advanced here. But yeah, it's very easy to kind of spin it up to where at least you can get like results on your website with Flask. So anyways, yeah, we'll continue this. But yeah, so anyways, we've gone over long enough. Thanks for sticking in there. But anyways, hope you guys have a good week. Looks like there's only 2 left, so have a great week. if you have any questions, let me know.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Yep. Thank you.